Okay, so we are continuing Masechet Makkot, nearly finished now. Daf Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph. We've seen the Mishnah at the bottom of Kaf Bet Amud Bet. Again, just to remind you, we're going through the procedure of the Makkot in terms of how they are administered, in terms of how this actually takes place, how long the whip is, what it's made of, really how the procedure takes place. The Shaliach Beit Din, who is called the Chazan Knesset, who goes and administers the lashes, how he does that, what the Dayanim have to do, the Psukim have to read at the same time, etc. That is what we are discussing more or less. Now, when you go through this Mishnah and you go through this Gemara, you kind of get a sense. We're so used to saying, well, it's Chayav Malkut, oh, it's lashes, whatever. Probably don't think about it. I know I certainly didn't think about it so much. Chayav, mitat beitin or karet or skila, etc. are very, very scary. Lashes. Okay. When we go through the details of the Gemara, it's pretty daunting, pretty intimidating. So again, gives us a sense. Again, how often did this actually take place before? How often did these things actually occur? So Malkot, we can surmise, probably took place a lot more than Chayav Mita, etc. But nonetheless, it's there as a deterrent. It's there to impress upon us the severity that the Torah gives us commands, tells us what we can do and what we can't do, and a person transgresses the word of Hashem. It's not a simple thing. Again, we're talking here about somebody who did it b'mezid, somebody did it intentionally. They had witnesses, they had warning, but it's a severe crime, and there is a punishment. Okay, so says the Gemara on the top of Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph. Let's pick it up from towards the end of the first line. We saw a number of statements, some related to our Mishnah and some not. A number of statements in the name of Rav Sheshet to the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So, Rav Sheshet Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Minayin la Ritzua Shishal Ega. It says, from where do we learn that the Ritzua, that the whip with which one administers the lashes, has to be from calf skin, from an Ega. Tichtiv, Arbaim Yakenu, v'samich lei lo tachsom shol b'disho. So we saw this previously as well, the juxtaposition of the two psukim, the one pasuk that says Arba'im Yakenu, talking about giving Malkot, and the other one that says Lo Tachsom Shol B'disho. It's those psukim are related to each other. That is talking about a shore, and therefore we know that the Makkot are related to that as well. We've previously learned in the Gemara from this Hekesh the fact that it's only a lav which is similar to the lav of lo tachsom. In other words, not a lav shenitak le'aseh and not a lav she'ein bo ma'aseh, which when we get Malkot, here we're learning something different, that the whip itself has to come from an ego. Okay, number two, Amar Rav Sheshet Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Minayin leyevama shenafla lifnei mukeh shchin she'en chosmin ota. Dichtiv lo tachsom shor b'disho v'samich lei ki yashvu achim yachdav. Okay, so here the Gemara goes on. So we learned the Torah said first Arba'im Yakenu, and then Lo Tachshom Shor B'disho, and now it learns Ki Yashvu Achim, etc. The next pasuk. So says the Gemara, says Rav Sheshet, from where do we know that a woman who is a Yavama, that if the Yavam is a Mukeh Shrin, is somebody who has boils and all sorts of unsightly, some sort of a physical defect, that she would not be required to perform Yibum, but they could do a Chalitza, and that would be okay, meaning we don't force her into the Yibum to marry him. In other words, we don't block her way. That is the drasha from Lo Tachsom, which means not to block, not to put an obstacle in front of it. So we don't put an obstacle in front of her, and she's not required to marry that individual, right? They can perform chalitza, and that's it. Nowadays, obviously, this is not something which is really practiced in Yibum is not something that we practice nowadays. Nowadays, we just we perform chalitza anyway. But so that is the second in which Rav Sheshet learns out over there. Number three, the Rav Sheshet Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Kol ha'mevazeh et hamoadim ki'ilu oved akum. Okay, so the first two limudim we had here were related to the psukim. Again, the first one was directly related to our Mishnah, learned from the juxtaposition of the psukim, and from there we went on to the juxtaposition of the next pasuk, and now it's just associative. The Gemara is teaching us something else which Rav Sheshet said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But he says, Kol ha'mevazeh et ha'moadim, anybody who disgraces the festivals. Now, interesting is that moadim, okay, there are different girsaot, moadim or moadot, but over here it relates not actually to the day of Yom Tov, but it relates to the day of Chol HaMoed. Have a look at the Rivan at the top. He says et ha'moadot. He says Cholosh HaMoed, somebody who disgraces Chol HaMoed. This is something which we need to take seriously. Unfortunately, sometimes people are not aware that, everybody knows that Yom Tov is Yom Tov, but the days in between, I mean, certainly if you go into Chutz La'aretz, it's much more difficult, especially when you think in Chutz La'aretz, so you have an extra day of Yom Tov in the first place. And for many people that are working, so the days of Yom Tov itself, you have to take out of your holiday days and you go back. It's work, it's business as usual on Chol HaMoed. Baruch Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, so we have a bracha that the days of Yom Tov are the days that we have off, that's part of living in a Jewish country and living in a Jewish state, that we don't go to work on those days, and therefore it's much easier to take Chol HaMoed off as well. But there's a big discussion, there's a time Masechet about it, Masechet Moed Katan, regarding the Yisur Melacha on Chol HaMoed, right? It is forbidden to perform Melacha on Chol HaMoed. It's not the same as the melacha that you can't do on Shabbos and Yom Tov. There are many categories which are permitted. For example, anything which is letzorech hamoed, anything which is needed for the moed itself, you're allowed to do. So you're allowed to cook, you're allowed to shop, etc. But shopping is a good example. Can a person just go shopping? Let's say there are sales on something that you don't need. You don't need it for Yom Tov. If you need new clothes for Yom Tov itself, so there's no problem to go on your Chol HaMoed and buy it. You should do it before, but if you weren't able to, or something like that. But if a person just enjoys retail therapy, can they go out to the shops on Chol HaMoed? So if it has nothing to do with Yom Tov itself, so that may be forbidden. Getting in, what's called melechet uman. So generally speaking, we talk about the melacha of Chol HaMoed, referring more to things which take a skill, things like professional skills. You have clothes which need to be altered. You have a tikkunim, you have a renovations which need to be done in your house, or hopefully I'm not hitting on a nerve. You have something that needs to be fixed. You need to call in a technician to fix your computer or your car, something like that. So these are all things which on Chol HaMoed would be problematic to perform. So and other things as well. So that's something we need to be aware of. Says Rav Sheshet, the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Kol ha'mevazeh et ha'moadim ki'ilu oved avodah zarah. So very strong language. He says somebody who disgraces the festivals, and again he's talking about Chol HaMoed as if he worships idols. So whenever the Gemara says ki'ilu, it's not, so it means it's not completely equivalent, but it's again impressing upon us the severity. So what I began to say was that there are in the Rishonim, how do we view this? Is it that the default position is that there are certain melachot and Chol HaMoed which are forbidden d'oraita from the Torah, but then they are certain things are allowed, or is it that from the Torah everything is permitted, but it was Rabbanan who came and said it was forbidden? So a lot of discussion there amongst the Rishonim. An interesting shita, I think it's the Rashba who writes, and he brings a principle that says in this case, Masrana katov lidei chachamim. In other words, the understanding is that the Torah said certain melachot are going to be forbidden on Chol HaMoed. Which melachot? That the Torah did not specify. That the Torah invested within the Chachamim the ability to decide which melachot the Torah intended should be forbidden or not. So it's somewhere in between. It's like quasi sort of in between Doraita and Rabbanan. That's how many learn. But that is so. Where do we know that this is so severe? Why does he say? It sounds a little bit extreme. Okay, the pasuk says, we have the pasuk warning us against in Sefer Shmot, warning us against avodah zarah. Elohei masecha lo taseh lecha. Since the pasuk here is talking about idolatry, so we would say Elohei masecha and not Elokei, because we're talking about false gods. Don't make these false images, etc. Next to it, it says Et Chag HaMatzot Tishmor. Now the full pasuk over there says Et Chag HaMatzot Tishmor Shivat Yamim. Keep Chag HaMatzot for 7 days. So says Rivan over here, Chag HaMatzot Tishmor, Mefarish B'Chagiga, the Gemara Chagiga explains, Im B'Rishon V'Shvi'i Arik V'Amor. When it says Chag HaMitzvot Tishmo, we already know, the Torah tells us elsewhere that the first day and the last day you have to keep as Yom Tov. So it's not referring to that. Rather, it's going to teach you about Chol HaMoed, which is Asur in Asiyat Melacha. So clearly, according to this interpretation, the Isur Melacha and Chol HaMoed is Midoraita. And again, you could explain that it's Midoraita, but it was not defined on the Doraita level. That was Masrani Lidei Chachamim. Okay, V'amar Rav Sheshet Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. A fourth limud, again, by Rav Sheshet in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Kol ha-mesaper lashon hara, v'kol ha-mekabel lashon hara, v'kol ha-me'id edut sheker. So three things. Anybody who speaks lashon hara, anybody who accepts lashon hara, right, who listens to and accepts lashon hara, v'kol ha-me'id edut sheker. And anybody who comes to Beit Din and testifies falsely. Ra'oi lashlicho leklavim is worthy of being thrown to the dogs. Again, very, very extreme. Why do we say that? Tichtiv lakelev tashlichun oto v'samech lei lo tisa shemashav. If you look back in the Psukim in Sefer Shmot. So again, it talks about, the Pasuk says, Anshe Kodesh Tiyun Li, Basar Basadeh Treifa Lo Tuchlu, Lakelev Tashlichun Oto. So that Pasuk, the Pshat over there, is saying you can throw it to the dogs, saying if you have Basar Basadeh Treifa, you have non-kosher meat, you can throw it to the dogs. In other words, you can still benefit from non-kosher meat. We know that when it comes to meat and milk, for example, a person cannot benefit. So could a person feed, if a person has pets, you could not feed your pets from a mixture of milk and meat. You could not feed your pets from chametz on Pesach. Those are the two exceptions we have. Those are the two when it comes to Isurei Achila, both meat and milk and chametz, that we cannot not just eat, but we cannot benefit either. Gemara Pesachim goes through a whole list of different Isurei Achila, and it learns out that for most of them, benefit would still be permitted, with the two exceptions that I mentioned. So neveilot and treifot, non-kosher meat, you can benefit from. This is why, by the way, if you could not, so then if you think kosher meat's expensive now, you can imagine how much worse it would be. Because many times, what happens when the meat, which are the chickens or the cows, whatever it is, after they've been shechted and they perform the checks, not everything is kosher, and you have many animals which are going to be treifot. It would not be neveilot. A nevela is an animal that's not been shechted, but a treifa is an animal that has been shechted, but it has a certain disease, where generally speaking wouldn't survive the year. Once they check that animal is non-kosher, so then it is sold off. It's sold off to non-Jews, and that's why, because not all the meat can be used, because it's very labor intensive, because of all the checks, etc. That's one of the reasons why kosher meat is more expensive. But it would be even more expensive were we not able to sell those things which are non-kosher. But so you can sell it, you can feed it to the dogs, etc. And then the next pasuk says, so not just like Evzash Lechonato, and then it says, Lo tisa shem hashav, don't bear a don't uphold a false testimony, right? Which is referring to listening to and accepting Lashon Hara. And then it says, V'kari be'inami lo tasi. Also, do not lift it up, meaning don't be the one to hear and to accept the false testimony, and don't be the one to say the false testimony as well. So both, whether it is testimony in Beit Din or if it is Lashon Hara, which is outside of Beit Din, both speaking Lashon Hara and accepting Lashon Hara. So I think we've mentioned before that Edut Sheker is false testimony. Lashon Hara is not false. Lashon Hara is true. It often happens, somebody says something, say, oh, it's Lashon Hara. Oh, no, but it's true. Yes, that is the definition. If it's not true, it's worse. That would be Motzi Shemra. Why does the Gemara, by the way, as well, talk about HaMekabel Lashon Hara versus HaShomea Lashon Hara? So it's one who accepts Lashon Hara, meaning one should not listen to Lashon Hara, but there are circumstances where one is permitted to listen. If it is for toilet, if it is for a constructive purpose, along with a number of other conditions, which I'm not going to go into now. But sometimes a person can say something. Sometimes a person can warn you off a potential partner in a shidduch, a potential partner in business, etc. So there, one would be required to listen. One would be required to listen, and one is able to suspect that what they have been told is true. One does not need to believe it, and one should not believe it, but one can suspect it in order to protect themselves. So that is why, but it's called a mekabel lashon hara. One who accepts lashon hara, that would be the prohibition. And again, why specifically the dogs. So there are those who explain that we know one of the reasons why the dogs were given this reward, that the meat is thrown to the dogs, because when it says when Bnei Israel left Egypt, that the dogs did not make a noise. Normally dogs bark a lot, but they did not make a noise, and they were able to hold their tongue, and as reward, they receive the meat. So too, says a person is unable to hold their tongue. A person is, if an animal can do it and be quiet, but you can't. So you're a oilishlach leklavim. That's what the Gemara is telling us over here. So we continue. So we're up to the 2 dots. We are about 4 or 5 lines from the wide lines, and the 2 dots is a shtei rutzuot. So we said in the Mishnah that you have 2 straps which are kind of folded over for this whip, right? We said. Well, we say we have the Ritzuah, which is from an egel, which is folded over into 4. And then we said, as well as that, you have shtei ritzot shel chamor, olot ve'odot ba. You have 2 straps of donkey skin, which are going up and down on it. So now says the Gemara, Tana, shel chamor, ki dedalish ha'u glila'a aleid Rav Chisda. So a certain chacham who was a Galila'a, he was from the Galil. He taught this the following drasha in front of Rav Chisda. He says, Yada shol koneo v'chamor evos ba'alav Yisrael lo yada. This is the pasuk in Yeshayahu, right near the very beginning of the book. Yeshayahu says, an ox knows its master, a donkey knows its the feeding trough from its master, where it's meant to go, what it's meant to do. But Yisrael lo yada, but Am Yisrael did not. Meaning, talking about when the prophet is giving rebuke to the Jewish people, and he says you were worse than an ox or a donkey who follows its master's commands, knows what it's meant to do. So yeah, from this drasha we say that it comes from the shor and the chamor, the ritzua, right? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, yavo mi shemakir levus ba'alav v'yifra mimi she'eno makir levus ba'alav. The one who knows from its master's feeding trough where it's meant to go, what it's meant to do, will come and teach. That's the donkey. Will come and teach the one who does not, the one who has sinned. Right? You could ask, by the way, over here we earlier had a drasha about shor from lo tachsom shor. That's why we know that the Tzwa has the egel. Why could we not just learn everything from here? So there are those who explain once you've learned the drasha related to lo tachsom shor, so we know that the shor is part of the drasha related to the Ritzuah. So we can now learn from this pasuk show about the chamor as well. Continues the Gemara, yada tefach. We said the handle of the whip has to be a tefach wide. Amar Abaye, shma mina kol chad v'chad lefum gavei avdinan le. Okay, so again, if you go back to the Mishnah just for a moment, what did it say? It said that yada tefach v'rochva tefach. We said that the handle and the width of the whip is a tefach. V'rosha magat al pi kreso. That the tip of the whip comes to the person's stomach. In other words, standing behind him, the length goes all the way over their back and goes up to their stomach. So that is obviously going to depend on how tall a person is. So you could have, based on that, it seems like you'd have a personalized whip. You know, nowadays everything is personalized. You have a personalized whip for every person that comes into Beit Din. But that seems a little bit strange. So it says, we go according to each person, according to his size. Says Rava, that's impossible. You're going to have thousands of different whips in the Beit Din. One for a person who's 6 foot, one for those 6'1", one for 6'2". It's what's going on here. So he says, Ela Marava Avkata Itle Kibai Miktarbe Kibai Malpebe. So it says Rava, no, you have sort of an avkata, you have sort of a knot, the way that the whip is tied, and when you want to give a miktabe, you could shorten it, and you could tighten it so that it becomes a little bit shorter. Kibai marapebe, when you wanted to, you could loosen it. In other words, so it's one whip, but it's an adjustable whip based on the size of the person who is there. Malkin Oto. So menahane. So where are these words? So what again? So we have to go back. This is one of those cases where each time the Gemara quotes a few words from the Mishnah, but it doesn't necessarily quote the part which we're talking about. So the next section was, we said Makkot shlish min fanav that he gets the Makkot, a third of them are in front and 2/3 are from behind. So where do we learn that from? So Amar Rav Kahana de Amar Krav v'hipilo hashofet v'ikav lefanav kedei lishato b'mispar. Again, so this is the pasuk that talks about how the Makkot take place. V'hipilo hashofet v'hikav lefanav, and he hits him in front of him. Kedei lishato b'mispar, according to his wickedness in the number. So the drasha he learns out is risha achat milfanav shtei reshuyot me'achorav, meaning one set, or sort of one wickedness is in front of him, and then you have 2 sets which are behind him. Right. So from essentially from the word, if you look at the pasuk, the drasha would be that the way it says v'pilo shofet v'hikau lefanav kedei lishato, meaning you hit him in the front. Kedei rishato, that's kind of the idea that it's risha achat, that there's one certain number of malkot that is milfanav, and then it says b'mispar. So again, we're learning out that from the mispar, that is in the numbers that is sort of multiplied. In other words, kedei rishato, one set that's in front of him, and then b'mispar, that's another 2 sets that comes behind him. That's shtei rishiyot me'acharav. Ein malkinoto, etc. So then the Mishnah continues, and it says, we go back to the Mishnah, we say, how does this take place? Right, it says, Eino makel tolo med v'lo yoshev ela muteh. You don't, this is done not standing, not sitting, but rather sort of leaning forward. Shneimar v'hipilo hashofet. So, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Minayin laratzua shehi muchpelet. We said that the whip has to be doubled over. It says, where do we know that from? Shneimar v'hipilo. So he says from the fact that the pasuk says v'hipilo hashofet. The word v'hipilo sounds like v'hichpilo. If we were to add in a chaf over there, that means doubled, right? From the language of kefer. So he learns from the hipilo that it's related to v'hichpilo, that the whip has to be doubled over. But it says the Gemara, but don't we learn? We actually saw in the Mishnah. Don't we learn that there is already a drasha from this word? We need it for itself. Why? That was where we learned out that it's not standing and it's not sitting, but it is sort of leaning over. So answers the Gemara. So if we've already learned that from this word in the pasuk, how can we learn it for something else? So im ken, well, if that was true, lichtov kra yatehu. The pasuk could have said yatehu. It could have meant you have him leaning over. Why does it say v'hipilo, a different word for saying leaning over? So maybe pilo shma minata. We learn from that 2 different things. We learn both of these ideas. Hamakeh biado. And then finally, the Mishnah said the one who's giving the well, not finally, but next. The Mishnah said that the one who is giving the Makkot does it with one hand, right? The Mishnah said, he hits him with one hand with all of his might. So, as I said at the beginning, this is not, there is an element of brutality in this. It's meant to be a punishment. It's meant to hurt. Well, the Gemara is now going to discuss how much, how far does it go? Meaning, who do we appoint as the Chazan Knesset to give over these whips? If you're going to appoint the strongest guy in town, then it's going to be much more painful than somebody else. So here we have an interesting machloket. Makeh be'ado. Tan Rabbanan. Ein ma'amidin chazanin, ela chasirei koach v'terei mada. So say Rabbanan, who do we appoint to be the chazan in this case? Who do we appoint to give over the Makkot? Only people who are chasirei koach, so people who are weak, v'terei mada, and who are intelligent. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu chasirei mada v'terei koach. So Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda says even if they are not intelligent, chasirei mada v'terei koach, and again are the strongest people. So what's the machloket between them? The machloket between them is going to be in terms of how hard we want this person to be hit. Clearly, according to Tanakama, To Rabbanan, we say we appoint people who are chaserei koach. We don't want the Makkot to be too severe. Rabbi Yehuda says dafka. Rabbi Yehuda says it can be, and perhaps maybe that it should be. The Gemara is now going to go in and prove it. Interesting point which this raises is that if you could have, obviously when the Beit Din is doing the assessment in terms of, as we discussed previously, in terms of how many Malkot the person can withstand, it's going to depend on who is administering the Makkot in terms of how strong they're going to be. And that needs to be part of the equation as well. Okay, so we will stop here for today and see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Have a good day.